What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another tutorial video on my channel F123. We just had the ABS comparison, if it is faster or not, and today we are getting into how you would drive without ABS and a few tricks that I would share with you guys out there just to make it easier for you to adapt from using ABS to using no ABS and just driving like a real F1 driver. So let's get right into it. We are already at Bahrain. It's still literally right after my recording. I've just done the German stuff. And yeah, so first of all, of course, go to your settings, select the assists, and then if you have ABS turned on, turn it off, because this is what we are gonna do today. Next up, we are checking our calibration, because this is really important. Your braking, the inputs, depending on how you brake. I don't know how you guys brake, what you think is the right braking, but usually in an F1 car, what you have to do is brake really hard initially and then ease off fairly quickly once the downforce starts decreasing and when you're getting closer to the apex of a corner, and you're slowly releasing the brake more and more and more and more and more. Okay, this is exactly how you have to brake an F1 car. It's also called threshold braking, or what most people call it, what is more familiar with you, trail braking. It is not exactly the same. I think trail braking is when you're turning into the corner. Threshold braking is just when you hit the brakes hard and then you ease off with a progressive load, like you're delaying getting off the brake. So it's not just like on off. Like, this is wrong. I mean, in the end, you're still going progressively, but it's just too fast. What you want to do is brake and then get off the brake slowly. Not as slow as with GT cars, but it's still going to be slower than what you're used to in a normal road car or how you're usually driving. So you really have to focus on building up this feeling of letting go of your foot slowly, not just letting it drop, because this is not how you do it. You really have to start getting a feeling for it, and it will take time. A load cell is gonna make it a little bit more easier because, well, actually, at the beginning, I think it's actually making it harder because you need to use more muscle-mind connection. With a normal brake, you have to travel, and if you go full, it's full braking. If you go less, it's like 70%. And with a load cell, you have to do it all by muscle connection and muscle feel. So it's a little bit different, but it's still the same concept. So just you brake hard initially and then you ease off slowly and progressively. And depending on the corner type, it's more braking and less braking. Like, for example, a high-speed corner like turn 5, like into the chicane, you just step the brakes a little bit, maybe like 20%, just to get the front turned in and slow the car down enough to make both corners without picking up marbles. Whilst into turn 1, you brake really hard and then you turn whilst braking into the corner. But you usually want to make sure your braking is as straight as possible. So always brake in a straight line, okay? And you will also see this, like, you can use it in the calibration just to get a feel for it, look at it and see how hard it is to brake. Depending on your brakes, like with a load cell, you can set up how hard you have to press into the brakes. If you make it more sensitive, you will brake easier at 100%, but it's gonna be taking way more muscle-mind connection if you have it like really sensitive, because trailing off the brakes is gonna be a bit rougher than when you have it like at pushing extreme forces. And now you can see it's also here, like there. Somewhere there, yeah, you can see my brake. So you brake hard and then you ease off into a corner. So if I'm going to this corner, for example, here, you're doing this here. You see, we are trailing off fairly quickly initially. For example, into the next corner, you have to hold the brakes longer at 100%, but then you're also trailing off the brakes quicker to like 70, 50%, and then the last few bits are a bit slower. You can see, and we're trading up until the apex. You don't go past the apex. If you go past the apex, you carry too much speed. You always want to hold the brakes to roughly before the apex, and then you usually already start applying throttle. And what this does is also make the weight transfer of the car. I'm not gonna get into too much detail because it's too complicated for all of you out there. I think most of you just want to understand how you have to brake, but what is going on here and why we do this is because if you hold the brakes, there's more weight on the front of the car. So the front tires have more grip and the turn-in is gonna be better. Of course, if you brake too much and you lock up the fronts, then what happens is you are basically just gonna lock up and go straight. So you have to find the right limit of brake pressure. And of course, one thing that can help a lot here is the brake bias. Playing with the brake bias on your MFD is going to be vital to braking without ABS, especially on F1 23. In previous years, you could just use 50 brake bias and was fine. This year you can't. If you use 50, it's gonna look like this, and you're not gonna lock up the fronts, but you're gonna lock up the rears, and you're just gonna spin. All right. So you've got to make sure you find the right balance for each corner. And in this game, usually if you're on a quite stable setup, like for example a default setup, it's usually between 54 and 56 brake bias. If you run a more looser setup, it should probably be between 55 and 57. So usually you don't run 50, but it all depends on your setup and the track as well. Corner type, all of these things play into this whole procedure. So, brake bias, very important. If you're struggling with rear locking, so if you feel like your car's getting loose under braking on the rear, increase it to a higher number. If you feel like you are going straight when braking, when you're turning, then what you're gonna do is you're reducing the brake bias by a few clicks or one click until you feel like it's gonna be more a rear lock than a front lock. And you want to find the sweet spot where you're comfortable with braking. For example, turn 1, if I'm on 54, it's too much. If it's 55, it's still a little bit too much. 56 gives me enough rotation while still being able to not lock up the fronts too much. You can see the rear is locking a little bit, but also the front. So it's a decent balance. If one is too much, then the other, it's not looking good. And this is how you're thinking about the brake bias. So with this, you can really manipulate how the car's behaving, and like I said, brake as much as you can in a straight line, but when you're turning in and you're doing the tray braking, so heavy braking in a straight line, then ease off whilst turning. The more you turn and the more speed you reduce, the more you have to get off the brakes, because your downforce is getting lower and you're tending to lock up more. And this is already how you brake without ABS, guys. It is very straightforward, and it's gonna take a lot of time and patience to nail it down, but I know you can do it, so please make sure you just stay patient and you stick with it, and then you will one day master it and feel like a real F1 driver when driving. So, if you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please make sure to smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Have a lovely day. You're Marcel. Peace.